Today we're going to talk about the 3 biggest myths with soundproofing. So let's jump into it right now. All right, so myth number 1 is thinking that the insulation you put in the walls is actually going to help with your soundproofing. I hear so often that people are like, what insulation should I use in the walls? And it makes perfect sense. Logically, putting something in the walls that fills up the airspace in between your walls, it should stop sound, right? The problem is that insulation, especially rock wool insulation, is expensive and it actually doesn't do anything to soundproof your wall. Now, just to clarify, if you're going to build a regular wall that has nothing to do with soundproofing, just a typical wall in your house, and you are like, hey, I want it to be more soundproof than a wall without insulation in it, sure. Put rock wool insulation in it, something like Safe and Sound, some product like that is a little more expensive than traditional pink insulation. That will help a little bit. I did it in my house. It didn't help that much, trust me. If you want to do a good job soundproofing a wall, you need to do a double wall with a 1-inch air gap. So that means having one wall on one side of your room, creating an air gap in the middle, and then putting another wall on the other side and framing that and putting 2 layers of drywall on each wall, plus using regular old cheap pink insulation, and that will do the trick. That'll give you the most sound isolation that you can possibly get. So stop thinking about the fact that you need to worry so much about insulation and start thinking about the actual science behind how soundproofing really works. The second biggest myth with soundproofing is this idea of floating a floor. I know, for the longest time, I thought you build a room within a room, you float this floor, and suddenly your floor is soundproof. The problem with this idea, especially the idea of floating a floor on hockey pucks or something like that, some sort of homemade system, is that floating a floor essentially only does one thing, and that helps with the sound transmission from the floor to whatever is underneath it. But sound transmission is only one part of soundproofing. The biggest part of soundproofing is mass. And what you really want to do with your floor is make it as massive as possible. So the most ideal floor for soundproofing is honestly a concrete floor. So something like a garage, or pouring a cement foundation and then laying like a typical hardwood floor or engineered hardwood floor or laminate floor, whatever you want to do on top of that concrete, will honestly give you the greatest amount of sound isolation possible. Now, if you live in a home that does not have a concrete floor as its base and maybe has a traditional wood deck, then you got to do something a little more complicated, which is adding mass to the bottom of the floor itself. And this can run into some problems, but essentially what you do is you take layers of the 5/8 inch super heavy drywall that you're going to use on your walls and your ceiling, and you actually attach them underneath your floor to give your floor added mass. And this is going to make your floor stop sound, because the sound is going to hit that massive layer and it's going to slow down and hopefully not come through the floor as much. So before you go adding a ton of mass to your floor, you want to talk to a structural engineer and make sure that your floor can withstand the weight of the added mass, plus all the furniture and people and stuff that are going to be standing on top of this floor. So I hope that busts a common myth, which is like, if I just float this floor, everything's going to be okay. And another thing to think about is when you float a floor, you're actually creating an air gap underneath the floor, which could create weird reverberant frequencies that may actually make your room sound worse. So definitely think carefully about this before you just start building a floating floor. So myth number 3 is a big one, and that is the idea that if we just hang carpets and blankets and soft things on our walls, that we are essentially soundproofing our room. And the truthful answer is you're not soundproofing at all. You're actually trying to help with acoustic treatment. And even then, it's a pretty crappy way to do acoustic treatment. Acoustic panels are going to be the best way to acoustically treat your room. Plus, they'll just look better. So I know in a pinch, a lot of people have said, oh, just hang blankets on the walls. And it's true. Yeah, you will deaden the sound of your room. But will you deaden the frequencies across the entire frequency spectrum? Probably not. And will it honestly help your room that much? Probably not as well. So with soundproofing, the whole idea is to create mass, create an airtight room, and to reduce or eliminate all transference of sound from the outside to the inside of the room. So to do that, you have a very specific system, and it doesn't involve adding carpets or blankets or packing blankets or things like that on the walls. So if you'd like to learn more about soundproofing, I have a free soundproofing course at the description below, and you will also be able to sign up for my free course on my 10 secrets to professional recordings and mixes when you sign up for that free soundproofing course. So if you're interested in learning more, I'd love to see you in the free course. Until next week, have a great one.